And welcome, rugby fans, to Rugby 411. As always, I'm your host. My name is Joshua Shibata, and this is the power rankings for MLR week number 7. And again, what a great week of rugby. Some really exciting games, some interesting developments, maybe an upset here or there, but definitely enough to kind of shake up a little bit of the rankings, at least in the middle. The top and the bottom, I feel, especially week 7, we're starting again to kind of see where a lot of teams are. We're kind of figuring out who exactly are on the bottom of the league and who are fighting for those playoff spots. But I feel the middle teams are still trying to make their way to the top. And especially with 6 spots open for the playoffs, these two spots here, 5 and 6, are going to be the ones that everybody's fighting for. And of course, with the top two teams from the West and the East, those spots you're fighting for so you can get that bye going into the playoffs. Now, again, just a little note: if you've never seen one of my videos for power rankings, the records of the teams don't matter. Though it kind of plays out where you have your stronger teams here and the teams that have less wins or no wins kind of on the bottom. It really deals with what happens on the pitch, what you've done currently in the game, not necessarily what you did at the beginning of the season. Strength of schedule with your opponents, if you won at home compared to away, how good a victory it was, if you totally destroy a team, especially a team that's highly ranked or ranked higher than you obviously should move up higher than, say, you destroy, for example, one of our games, you had the number 1 team and the number 13 team in my power rankings playing all against each other. Obviously, the number 1 team won, so you should win that game, if you're the number 1 team. And the number 13 team obviously can't really be slighted for losing to the number 1 team. So with that being said, let's start with the number 13 team. Unfortunately, Old Glory DC going against the number 1 power rank team from last week, Rugby ATL. Even though Old Glory was coming off of a bye, and even though it was being played at Segra Field, ATL just, it's ATL. A very, very good team. Old Glory did start coming back a little bit at the end of the game, and I feel, and I do believe ATL did this a little bit at the beginning of the season. ATL kind of pulls their foot off of the gas a little bit. Old Glory kind of came back, scored a try. They were on the verge of scoring a second try, but just ran out of time. Scores 27-13. Again, not too bad for a team that hasn't won a game yet against a team that is the proverbial number 1 team. Not too shabby for Old Glory, but unfortunately not enough where I feel that they should have moved up. And to be honest, let's go into the next team, which is your other team who hasn't won a game yet in Major League Rugby, the new kids on the block, the Dallas Jackals. I have to say, to be honest, this is 12-13, but it really feels to me more like 13A and 13B. I don't feel there's really too much separating the two. Again, neither one has won a game. Dallas has shown more fighting spirit in their first few games. It seems, again, I don't want to say it, and this game, they lost against Seattle. In this game, they had an unfortunate red card. Matt Fringe, for whatever reason, punched. I forgot who he punched from Seattle, but blatantly punched the guy, and yeah, red card. And so for the remainder, or at least for the 20 minutes of the game, Dallas was struggling with only 14 men on the field, which again, against any team, you're really gonna suffer. So Dallas has kind of shown, and I was afraid of this, a little bit of maybe things are not going so well, so what are we going to do? Old Glory seemed to show a little bit more fight, but again, it's just one game. Who knows what's going to happen next week? And I really don't think there's too much separating these two right now. Also, that being said, the number 11 team, your 2-time MLR champions, the Seattle Seawolves. I don't feel there's too much separating them from these two teams, unfortunately. Seattle started off really hot, 3 straight wins, and then suffered 3 straight losses. This win against the Dallas Jackals is their first win in 4 games. And again, it's against the Dallas Jackals. So really, that should be a game you dominate in. And they did. They did 34-12. But again, it's the Dallas Jackals. Seattle goes against the LA Guillotines this coming weekend in Seattle. So I feel that could be a statement game for them if they prove how dominant they can be, if they can prove that the seawall still exists. Because again, unfortunately, before going against Dallas, 3 straight losses, which is why Seattle is near the bottom. Moving on, number 10. A game that was very, very difficult for them. Give them a lot of credit. Nola Gold went against a very hot Rooney at Nola in the gold mine. 19-30 was the score. Unfortunately, Nola really got dominated in that game. Again, Rooney is one of the top teams in the league, or at least in my power rankings. So really, nothing to be ashamed of for this loss. And that's why I didn't drop them below Seattle, because again, they are going against a number 2 team. No spoilers, but a number 2 team, or actually a number 3 team. You'd expect that. Seattle, I felt, should have maybe been a little bit more dominant over Dallas. So I didn't feel there's any reason to flip these two just yet. I still think both of these two, again, I feel a lot of these lower ranking teams, there's not much separating them, so I didn't feel there was a lot of reason to move those teams around. So I feel comfortable with NOLA being where they are. I also feel comfortable having Houston, the team that had a bye this last weekend, slide down from the number 8 spot to number 9. They're going to be coming back this weekend with some action. Now, some interesting movement because of certain losses. Utah slides down from number 5 to number 8 with their unfortunate loss to the Toronto Arrows in Zion Field too. Utah's back to being Utah. Yeah, it's I remember when they destroyed Dallas in Zion Field, their first home game. Everybody was saying it's because Utah, their field is a legit rugby field, and so Utah plays more comfortably in a in a wider field. Rugby dimensions are a little bit wider than a regular football field. Utah is used to that, and they took advantage of it. I wasn't quite sure about that. I felt that drumming was again because they went against Dallas and breaking MLR records, scoring the most points ever by an MLR team. The test was they got another match at home against the Toronto Arrows, a team that has been struggling, still on the longest road trip in the history of professional sports, and yet Utah lost. They looked completely flat in the first half of the game. Now, granted, they did come back within 3. So, it ended up being close. But in that first half, if you were to ask me which was the dominant team, is by far the Arrows. The Arrows looked like the better team, and they still look like the better team. Again, when Utah scores, because of Mika Kruse and Mikey Teo. When Utah doesn't do anything, for whatever reason, Mikey and Mika are completely gone from action. So there's something going on with Utah where things are just not connecting the way that they should have, or the way that they did last year. And they are really, really struggling. I don't feel home field has anything to do with it. I really do feel it's teams have figured out what to do against Utah. And Utah needs to figure out how to change that. Otherwise, they don't get to play against teams like Dallas every week. And they're going to be struggling a lot because of that. So they slid down from number 5 to number 8. Also sliding down after a very valid effort in the Cali Cup. The San Diego Legion visited the world-famous LA Coliseum, and they fell short to the LA Guillotines, losing 13-26. Again, a valiant effort. Gotta praise a guy like Joe Peterson, who is the fly half for the San Diego Legion. Great player, accurate kicker, was 3 for 3 off the tee, had 8 points. He is now tied with New England's Bodine Waka for the most points scored in the season thus far with 66 points. A huge reason why San Diego is a good team. But unfortunately, if he doesn't have the opportunity to kick the tee, he can't score points. LA's great defense limited San Diego to just one try and a couple of penalty kicks by Joe Peterson, and thus San Diego fell short, sliding down one spot from number 7, number 6. The big jumper for this week were the Toronto Arrows. Surprising me, they are by hook or by crook still on the longest road trip in all of professional sports. Went over to Zion Field. Beautiful, beautiful field. If you ever seen Zion Field on TV, oh my God, it looks gorgeous. I hope one day to visit Utah for a game, because that place looks like an amazing place to watch some rugby. Arrows took in the sights and took the win, beating Utah. Again, the score ended up being very, very close. But Arrows walked away with the win, and because of that win away from home, jumped up the Arrows the most from the number 10 spot all the way to number 6. And again, felt more impressive. Obviously, San Diego lost, Utah lost, Houston didn't play. Toronto belongs there. Number 5, another big jumper. You're reigning and defending. Yes, it is great. It does feel great to say this. MLR champions, the LA Guiltinis, and the defenders of the Cali Cup. It stays in LA. Was able to watch that game at the LA Coliseum live. It was their best performance so far this year. Not perfect by all means, not perfect. There were some interesting developments with Coach Renee Ai, who's the 4th string fly half, if you want to be accurate about it, not being able to kick conversions. But as much as Luke Burton has been criticized for his kicking abilities, Luke Burton was amazing. Made some very difficult conversions. LA's firepower came back. First time this season they've scored 4 tries, which gave them the all-important bonus points with the win. LA looked like it finally clicked, and hopefully that continues as they go over to Seattle for their next game. But right now, LA is looking pretty dangerous, and if all the other injured players start to come back, rugby is a sport where it's all about the attrition. It's all about what team can survive the longest and go the furthest, not necessarily who starts out the hottest, which is what makes some of the teams up here in the elite kind of susceptible, I feel. And I'll reveal who exactly I'm kind of picking to see. Maybe they may not be long for this top spot, but we'll move into that. As we move into the next team, once upon a time, the most dominant team in Major League Rugby, barely hanging on to the number 4 spot, the Austin Gilgronis. And I say barely because they went against a very, very good team in the New England Free Jacks. It was a very exciting game. I said it was going to be the game of the week, and it was. But New England looked hot from the start. Austin came back in the second half, scored 10 unanswered points. They got really, really close with a try, but unfortunately it was called back. Some people would claim it was a little controversial, but it wasn't. I'm a stickler for rules. If you've seen my How Rugby is Played introductory videos, I'm really big on figuring out rules of the game, the laws of rugby. If you watch the game and you're wondering about it, the way the game works in rugby, in the way that the penalty was called, the Austin players formed a scrum. Now, granted, the scrum was not a great scrum, but anytime you have a player of the same team going over the tackled player, a scrum is formed. When a scrum is formed, that forms the online line. You can't have an opposing team cross that line. Likewise, you can't have the same team member go over the line, especially if a scrum has been formed. And unfortunately, it was, albeit briefly, the person that ended up picking up the ball had his foot in front of the scrum. And it only needs to be 1 foot. And unfortunately, that person scored the try. That try was not allowed. As much as Austin were complaining about a high tackle during the process of the try being scored, doesn't matter because the offsides happened before the try was scored. So a heartbreaker, very, very close game. Again, really, really good effort. And because the game was so close, I felt there was no reason to bring Austin down. Despite the efforts of the Guiltinis and the Arrows, I felt Austin did enough. And again, going against the number 2 team, it's not easy. And Austin hung with them. It was a great game. I didn't feel that Austin should have slid, so I kept them up there. Now, how long? It's interesting because, again, this is, another game where Austin was held down to only 17 points. When Austin started the season, they were roughly averaging 50 points a game. Last 3 games, they've scored no more than 23. So, nearly half of the firepower. It just seems that Austin's kind of winding down. Maybe other teams have kind of figured it out. Or, again, Austin has yet to have their bye. So, it's been a long season so far. And I think a lot of the Austin players have really been beaten up, and they are just waiting for that break. And again, they're just holding on barely to that number 4 spot. We'll see what happens in the next coming weeks to see if they slide anywhere further. Moving in, number 3, as mentioned before, we got Rugby New York. Again, played a really, really great game. And, they were dominant. Not much more to say about that against New Orleans. And again, the reason why I didn't have Nola slide so far down, you're playing against the number 3 team. Rooney is Rooney. And they are looking really, really good right now. Really fighting for over these top 3 spots is Rooney. Kind of separating themselves from Austin, to be honest. Then, number 2, the team that defeated Austin, New England Free Jacks, looking really, really good. I thought it was really interesting. In a game against such a dangerous opponent as Austin, Free Jacks decided to sit out the player of the month, Bodine Waka, and have him come in on reserve. I thought that was very interesting. It ended up not really mattering because the Free Jacks won the game. But I thought that was a little risky, but it worked out in the end. But Free Jacks are definitely looking like the team to beat. I was real close to wondering if I should jump them to number 1 because I thought their performance, especially against the number 4 team, was really impressive. But, I just really didn't feel it was so impressive that I had to have them jump over the number 1 team, Rugby ATL. Now again, Rugby ATL played against the number 13 team, Old Glory DC. So their win, 27-13, not as impressive as one would think, but I didn't feel it was that horrible that the Free Jacks should have jumped them. So basically what I'm trying to say is that really these lower ranked teams, very little separating them. These upper ranked teams, very little separating them as well. That's kind of how the power rankings are working out. And it's now these teams here that are fighting for this top spot. Maybe the possibility of Utah, Houston. NOLA is actually looking a little bit more impressive than thought. Still don't know what's up with Seattle. They looked really good at the beginning of the season, but again, power rankings are all about the here and now. They have not been looking so good, winning their first game in 4. So, again, you're starting to see teams kind of separate themselves from the pack, and it's really, really interesting, really exciting. Again, the East looks to be the more competitive of the 2 conferences, but, if you look at the rankings, really, Austin, San Diego, Utah are kind of bunched together. It didn't help that both Utah and San Diego lost. LA is still pretty far behind to kind of gain any speed. Seattle's kind of moving its way up as well. So even on the power rankings, it doesn't look as competitive. There is some competition here in the West, but the East is really where it's at. If I had to bet right now, I would think whoever comes out of the East might be the favorite to win the MLR Shield at the end of the season. But again, lots to happen till then. We're only technically in week 8, almost halfway through. So, it's still a lot of rugby to play. So, anyways, as always, love to hear your comments, see what you think. Did your favorite team make it to the top of the power rankings, or are they on the bottom? Let me know what you think. And as always, thank you very much for checking out my video, and I will see you on the pitch.